I think we're going to be balanced because the eastern seaboard of the Gulf region is still locations that are ripe for government contracting, whether it's Qatar, UAE, Bahrain. Those opportunities will remain. I think U.S. Force presence will be somewhat reduced, but I don't think the presence will be gone. I think the region is too important from an energy perspective. And really, if you look at the capabilities that the region has, not just from a resource perspective, but from capabilities, whether it's AI, whether it's regional sustainment capabilities, maintenance capabilities.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Future of GovCon. This is a weekly podcast to bring together experts from across the industry and look at what's happening today and how it's going to impact the future of our industry. I'm Jake Frazer. I'm the owner and CEO of Precision Talent Solutions. You know, in leading one of the industry's top executive search firms, I get to talk to influencers every day. C-suite executives, board members, growth leaders, top government officials, military flag officers. And on this podcast, what we're doing is we're bringing in these experts from AI, from space, from medical, from logistics, from engineering. And we're sitting down and talking about what's happening in their specific area of the industry and how it will impact the future. So pour a cup of coffee and let's get started. Hey everyone, it's Jake. Welcome back to another episode of the Future of GovCon, our podcast where we sit down with experts in our industry and we talk about where the industry is heading. Today, we're lucky to have a very accomplished officer and a real thought leader as our podcast guest. Recently retired Brigadier General, recently retired Mike Siegl. Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here, dude. Thanks.
Where in the world are you calling in from?
I'm calling here from the DC area where we just received a whole bunch of snow. So,
all right.
It's nice to be here, warm and toasty inside doing this podcast.
I had the pleasure of getting to hang out with Mike a little bit a few weeks ago. He was there on a panel at the ISOA Summit when he did a great job. He's also one of our precision experts, and he was introduced to our network at an event we did. Mike's got a lot of experience, just a really good way. You'll figure out he's super smart. I'll let him talk about his bio, but the high points, I mean, Mike's got almost 30 years as an Army officer. I think I was year group 95. Were you also 95?
I was, yeah.
We're two 95ers, but he went to Stanford, which is a pretty good school, did ROTC there. I want to hear about your cadet life. Has a master's degree from Georgetown, was a national security fellow at Harvard's JFK School of Government. So he has just incredible background and interesting childhood growing up that he can share with us. But he spent 30 years helping to transform the U.S. Army's logistics, which is incredible and culminating. He was the 57th Commandant of the Quartermaster School. So he guided and oversaw the training of the future logisticians of the Army, and then just a capstone role as the CENTCOM J4 as the Director of Logistics and Engineering. So just an incredible resume, an impressive academic leadership and logistics background. So Mike, thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, no, this is an amazing opportunity to just connect with you and your audience. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's kind of cool talking to someone that we had the same commission, the same point in life. We started down the same path, and now here we are back together again. So I love it. I really do. So before we get into talking logistics, let's talk about Mike. Let's talk about growing up. I know you have a very international background in childhood, and so talk about a little bit about what made you the person, the leader, the logistician that you are today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Look, I was born in Korea, lived there till I was 4 years old, and my dad worked for an oil company, and he was stationed overseas. We moved to Singapore. And I just remember when I got to Singapore, my dad wanted to put me into the kindergarten at the Singapore American School. They said no. Unfortunately, apparently my English wasn't good enough. And my dad said, wait a minute, that's why I'm trying to put him into kindergarten. So he took me from that school over to a British school, and I went to a British school from kindergarten to fourth grade while we lived in Singapore. So I developed a slight British accent that I can't hear myself, but apparently some Brits can hear it. So I'm not sure if it's still with me. In any case, after that, we moved to Phuket, Thailand. So originally we were going to go to Bangkok, but since my dad was going to go uh, into the ocean area platform for a month and then come home for a month, he figured it'd be better if we stayed in a more uh, safe setting, I guess, than Bangkok at the time. And so we moved to Phuket and lived there for 3 years. I had a childhood of 3 tutors. My curriculum was from a school out of Maryland, and during that year, each year for 3 years, I had 3 tutors that taught me all the subjects. But I was done by noon each day, essentially. And so after noon, I would go to the beach, and that's what you do in Phuket, Thailand. So,
Yeah, right.
and this is in the 80s, and so it was. And I hear it's still pristine, clean, but back then it probably was even cleaner. You could see, 100 feet into the water, and it was nothing. It was amazing. So, and then we moved back to Singapore, and I went. This time, Singapore American School took me in. So I did 8th grade to 12th grade, and so graduated there, and then went to Stanford, which was a reverse culture shock for me because I hadn't lived in the States before then. Growing up in Singapore, you grow up with movies from Hong Kong, not American movies.
So I just assumed you had a military background like I did because you lived and traveled as a child. Did you have any kind of military or government influence that kind of shaped you towards going into ROTC or going in the military direction?
I think the fact that I lived overseas all my life and the first time I really lived in the States was for college was the sort of the driving factor for why I kind of wanted to feel like an American. I wanted to feel like I could prove that I could give back. And when you live overseas, even though you're an American, you're kind of disassociated with the country. And like I said, it was like a reverse culture shock. So there was an event at the school, and they had an ROTC booth, and that kind of drew me to them. And it was an opportunity for me to um, sort of embrace who I was as an American. And so I guess in a long way, that's kind of what drove me there. And one more story, slightly related. When my mother, who's Korean, was 10 years old, that was in 1953. It was the end of the Korean War. So she's a 10-year-old child. And she had sort of this moment that kind of seared into her memory of an American soldier that gave her his rations. And unlike many Asian families who probably wouldn't support the child going into the military, my mother was all about me joining. And so when I told her I was interested in joining, she was like, absolutely. So that moment way back when kind of set the trajectory, I guess. And then just to close the story, fast forward to when I was the Quartermaster General, one of the functions of the Quartermaster Corps is food service. And so I thought it was sort of a nice sort of closing of the loop back to what that American soldier did for my mother back in 1953.
We have no idea the little things we do, the impact it can have on people's lives. That's important to remember. So you got a ROTC scholarship, I assume, to go to Stanford. Is that right? Or was it?
I did. No, I did. I got a 3-year ROTC scholarship. So since I joined it after I got there, my freshman year.
After you got there. So talk about life at Stanford. Mike Siegl as a college student. How were you? You a good cadet?
No, if I'm going to be truthful about this, I probably was not the best cadet. And we actually had to go down to Santa Clara University. There was 3 in my class, including myself. And we went down there, if I recall, 2 to 3 times a week. We would do PT, and then we would have classes, then we'd come back. But at the time, we would come back and we would shed our uniform and then blend back into the campus. Um, I think the environment for ROTC is much better nowadays. My son does ROTC right now as well, and I think colleges in general embrace ROTC a lot more than they did, I think, back in the 90s. I'm not sure your experience at your school, but at least at Stanford, it was kind of like we're tolerated, I guess. But I think the years have changed that, and I think there's a lot more acceptance of ROTC programs.
So talk about being a cadet, and you're getting along in your years, and you have to start picking the branch. Did you pick quartermaster? Was that were you directly branch quartermaster or branch detailed?
Yeah, quartermaster was my first choice, but I picked it only because there was a cadet ahead of me, and I went to advanced camp, and he had just commissioned, and he was waiting to go to his first assignment. So I saw him, and I asked him what his branch was, and he said quartermaster. I said, "What is that?" And he's like, "Well, it's logistics, and it's warehousing and supply." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, "Well, if you get out in 4 years, you can definitely use that skill set in the corporate world." And I said, "Okay, that's my first choice then." And so back then, I think ROTC did not do a very good job of educating cadets about what the branches were. They do a lot better now, and I think it's definitely improved. But that's how I picked quartermaster.
Yeah. Well, good. You got your first choice. I put armor down 6 times. I remember you had 6 choices, and I know you had to do 6 different choices. But hey, you're right. Quartermaster branch is absolutely transferable. No one wants a movement to contact in the real world. So well done. So coming out of ROTC and getting commissioned, talk about your first duty station. Where did you go? What was it like being a brand new second lieutenant in the big army?
Yeah. If I recall, I think there was a preference sheet. There's like 1 to 10, and you had to put like all your locations you wanted to go to. I put Korea last in my choices because I was actually trying to get stationed on the East Coast. But what they didn't tell you back then, I think, is that if you put Korea anywhere on your list, I think back then you were going to go regardless, right? So that was my first duty assignment to Korea. But it was kind of it was an experience that has defined my not only my army career but my life, right? Because the assignment to Korea got me more connected to my Korean roots. It not the first assignment, but subsequent assignments to Korea, I met my wife, and so my wife is Korean, and I attribute that very first assignment and the great leaders that I was able to work with that kind of shaped where I am today.
I read where you were in a helicopter crash. Is that right? Like in '99, as a young captain or a senior lieutenant?
Yeah, in 1999, this was February 4th, 1999. I was the aide to the assistant division commander for support, and we were back then. There was a helicopter that was dedicated to each of the general officers, so they could travel across Korea because everything was spread out. Anyway, we went to visit, in this case, a 2-9 Manchu battalion training location. And while we were heading there, we encountered a brownout situation. And yeah, unfortunately, the 2 pilots were killed. There were the myself, my boss at the time, the ADCS, and the crew chief. The 3 of us survived. But that to me was a defining moment of my life because that was in '99, and I was thinking about getting out of the military. But that event sort of reshaped my purpose, changed sort of my perspective on what was important in life. And so again, the assignment to Korea events during those assignments, including the helicopter crash, has really shaped where I am today.
And we find that a lot. And just talking to podcast guests and these forks in the road that happen in your life that just they have a profound effect in shaping your life. And I can imagine where that would be a real eye opener.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk a little bit about your growth through the military, some of the high points you might have had in your career.
Yeah. So going back to the Korea assignment, there are things that I learned during that assignment, working for some great leaders like Lieutenant Colonel Dean Dulles at the time, who really trained us with skills that I still use today. And I remember when I was a battalion commander at JBLM of Fort Lewis, as a Striker BSB commander, we were trying to do a field training exercise. The concepts and the techniques that I learned as a lieutenant in Korea of how we jumped a brigade support area, how we did convoys, was all from that assignment in Korea that I was able to use as a battalion commander. So I think your first assignments are absolutely critical to some of the skill sets that you use and learn, throughout your career. So really enjoyed that. As far as highlights, I think commanding for me as a battalion commander was probably the most meaningful assignment and position I had in the Army in all 30 years. Partly because as a battalion commander, deploying into combat in Afghanistan and then spending the year there really gives you a perspective of, number one, how to lead soldiers, what soldiers go through in a stressful environment. And then because it was a deployment with a Striker BCT that became a combined task force, understanding how to do tactical logistics, right? And what was interesting, I tell people, sometimes we tend to overcomplicate things. I remember we came up with the support plan for our brigade combat team on a napkin. It was me, my S3, my SPO, just the three of us. We were sitting in a dining facility in Kandahar, and we were just moving into the area, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to support an area the size of West Virginia, essentially, and with units dispersed across Kandahar province, Zabul province, and a bit of the Argonaut Valley areas. And we sat there with a napkin, mapped it all out. Obviously, we did a lot more detailed work after that, but the concept came from that one meal and meeting that we had in Kandahar. But yeah, that assignment to me was probably the most tactically meaningful job I had. And then I'll tell you the second one is as the Quartermaster General, the 57th Quartermaster General, Commandant of the Quartermaster School. By the way, just to clarify, there is a difference between being the 57th Quartermaster General and being the 57th Quartermaster Commandant, because the number are different. As the Quartermaster General, my number, actually, I can go 57, 56, go all the way back to number one. And that number one is a guy named Thomas Mifflin, who was George Washington's personal assistant. So a year before the birth of our nation, the Continental Army gets created, and George Washington turns to his personal assistant and says, I don't know if it was Tommy, Thomas, or whoever, but you're my Quartermaster General. And he became number one. And the truth of the matter is, though, I don't think he was a very good quartermaster. But I will say that there have been some tremendous quartermasters throughout our history. One of them is Montgomery Meigs, who was the Quartermaster General during the Civil War. And if there was an architect to General Grant's success, it was Montgomery Meigs as his Quartermaster General, who back then the Quartermaster Corps was actually essentially encompassed all logistics.
Everything.
I did everything, right? So, but Montgomery Meigs, probably the architect of the Union victory during the Civil War.
Interesting. Long lineage. Talk about working with industry, with government contractors. A lot of folks in our audience are probably supported you at some point during your career. Talk about your first exposure to government contractors and how did you integrate government contractors into your support plan?
Yeah. So let me start with this thought first. I say we, when I was in the military, I think we didn't do a very good job of integrating and collaborating with industry, or didn't do it as well as we should have. Because during requirements generation, we usually do that internally to ourselves, and then we come up with whatever requirements, and then we give it to the government contracting team and says, "Here's our requirements. Can you do this?" The problem with that is, like most things in life, we don't always know what we don't know. And so on the military side, there might be information that the civilian side may have that could have informed the requirements. So whatever requirements we generate in our vacuum is probably not a very well informed requirements, or at least not fully informed. I think we didn't do very well. I do say that under the current administration, that integration, I think, is changing. I think the integration is becoming a lot closer, and it's happening when it needs to, which is at the beginning, right? And it's sort of the basics of planning in the military is the mission analysis piece is the most important, and that's at the beginning of the process. So why wouldn't you want the government contracting team with you? And so, as an example, when we did JLOTs off the coast of Gaza about a year and a half ago,
Okay.
some of the requirements required government contracting support. I wanted to bring in the contracted team early. Now, I had my own internal military contracting team, but I wanted to bring in external civilian contractors who have a lot of expertise. Unfortunately, at the time, because of the constraints and policies and regulations, I was not able to do that, right? And I think because of that, I think the execution of the JLOTs in certain areas could have been a lot better, because we just didn't know some of the facts on the ground.
Perspective from guys that already been doing it, right? Like
100%.
the guys you met, the Move One guys, have been supporting Gaza for years and know all the problems and the challenges. So
Yeah. I think those barriers are coming down a little bit, though, currently, and I think they will continue to come down.
like LogCap has like embedded planners, right? That's part of the contract is to provide integrated planners, which is we've been doing that for years on LogCap. Did you at what point were you relying most heavily on government contractors in your quartermaster career?
Yeah, I'd say probably in the deployed settings. So Afghanistan, Iraq. You know, I deployed to Iraq in 2008, and when we got there, there was a lot of requirements, especially since our mission for our brigade combat team changed. And because of that, we were moving to different locations that we hadn't prepared for. And so government contracting during that time, tremendously helpful. And I think it's really 2008 during that deployment is when I really appreciated the power of what government contracting can bring, right? And because the military, organic military, just doesn't have enough resources to be able to execute the missions. And intuitively, I think the military understands this, but we have too many regulations and policies that sort of put up these barriers.
Um, I know you've as you've emerged in your career, you've become very thoughtful about strategy, and I've been reading your blog. I love it. It's on your LinkedIn, and for our community, if you haven't checked it out, go check out Mike Siegl's LinkedIn profile. He's been blogging on the 7 imperatives of DoD contested logistics, That must be informed by 30 years in the Army. I think the quote I pulled out of there was turning logistics from a vulnerability into a strategic offset. And so talk a little bit about what you mean by that and what our kind of government contracting audience can be informed by that.
Yeah. So the seven imperatives, to your point, informed by my years serving in the military, thinking about logistics, thinking about contested logistics. I will say that we tend to overcomplicate things. Contested logistics is, in my mind, just executing logistics in contested environments, whether it's adversaries trying to do bad things or the weather hindering logistics operations. It's as simple as that.
Right.
So if you understand that conceptually, then what I look at is we have to look at logistics holistically. In the past, I think we tended to look at logistics in vacuums, whether it was a COCOM boundary vacuum or a CONUS. The problem with that is that logistics doesn't operate like that. Logistics is global. To get things from one location to another, especially if you don't have enough, requires that you coordinate with adjacent, whether it's adjacent commands, adjacent organizations. I think GovCon companies understand that, right? They understand this concept, so it's nothing new per se. But in the military, I think we had taken that view of being very uh, stovepiped. And so to be able to sort of break through the obstacles of contested logistics, we have to understand that logistics is global, what I call the globalization of logistics. Can't do planning and execution of logistics in contested environments just within the boundaries of a COCOM. And the example I'll use is in the last 2 years as a CENTCOM J4, with all of the munitions that were being used in the CENTCOM AOR, there's absolutely no way we could self-resource those munitions. We had to work with the joint staff, then branch out to the other COCOMs, and munitions were moving between COCOMs. And just to highlight the fact that munitions is global, but logistics is global. Now, when I talk about logistics being a strategic offset, it is foundationally what enables the execution of operations. It allows a commander to have operational reach, freedom of maneuver, and endurance. And if that is the foundation, then the more we can enable logistics through the use of emerging technologies, AI, to facilitate and accelerate what logistics can do, the greater the power of the execution of operations in my. And so, of the seven imperatives, the common thread amongst all of them is technology.
Yeah, I noticed you're writing about we got to look at it across all the domains. I mean, logistics happens across all the domains, and the next big war, or hopefully we don't have it, but the next big contested event that we have, it won't be linear. It won't just be a ground thing. It will be all domains, including space, right? Cyber, like your kind of the newer emerging domains, they all have a logistics component too, which have vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to look at it as an ecosystem, right? So in an ecosystem, and just think the globe is the ecosystem. And so what happens in one area has an effect on another area, both physically, in the physical domain, in the cyber domain. And so there's all these domains that we have to account for. Otherwise, if again, it goes back to not wanting to look at logistics functionally, you have to look at logistics holistically first, and then, of course, go into the functional areas. But if you only do one and not do the other, it's kind of yeah, absolutely. You're gonna miss the requirements.
How much were you dealing with space domain, and how much did that impact your life as the CENTCOM J4, for example?
Yeah. Definitely within the CENTCOM AOR, the space domain played a critical part in our ability to see ourselves and see what our adversaries were doing, which then informed the logistics posture. And at the time, if you look at the CENTCOM AOR, we had we had been heavily weighted on the east coast of the Arabian Peninsula,
Right.
facing north, based on actually really based on the Gulf War in the 90s, right? So
Right, yeah.
that posture hadn't changed till all this time. And what we, based on the space, being informed by what we could see and imageries from the space domain, we modified our posture in the region. And there was a effort called the Western Access Network, and it was really just about rebalancing where our sustainment capabilities were in the CENTCOM AOR. And so, and I think it's still ongoing right now. The rebalancing of our sustainment posture, again, informed by many domains, especially the space domain.
Fascinating. Yeah. It's, way past my time. I mean, the DoD, the footprint in CENTCOM has transformed substantially over the last 20 years, right? I think the peak. I'm talking just not warfighter footprint. I'm talking government contractor footprint. I think it peaked at about 52,000 government contractors in the CENTCOM AOR, and now it's down less than half, down around 20,000. But the mission is still extremely complex, and it's probably more dispersed. How are we able to keep the mission up with less than half of the support, at least the industry support in the CENTCOM AOR?
Yeah, I think part of it is the consolidation of locations. And so, to your point, there's been a huge reduction, although there was a little spike in last 2 years just because of what occurred after the 7 October attack by Hamas on Israel and the Iranian actions. Having said that, the footprints, the way, at least from a sustainment perspective, we were looking at this was to consolidate as much of the capabilities to create some economies of scale. And that's how we were mitigating this reduction of forces. To your point earlier, if you have less people, then that really translates to less capability, which then means that you're probably not going to be able to meet the requirement unless you reduce the requirement. And one way of doing that for us was to consolidate areas, whether it was bases, or the other thing we were trying to do was to use cross leveling of capabilities. So take an Air Force location that was doing some advanced manufacturing, additive manufacturing. We leverage that to create parts for the Army, and we were moving towards creating sort of this collaborative network. In this specific case, a network of additive manufacturing capabilities across our AOR. That's just one small example of how we were trying to reduce the requirements and increase capabilities by doing economies of scale across the services that we have in CENTCOM.
What are your thoughts on? I know that there's talk right now of realigning the COCOMs within the Department of War, and there's one concept out there is going to more of a U.S. international command and consolidating CENTCOM, AFRICOM, and EUCOM. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something you think will happen? Do you think it's a good idea? What's your opinion?
Yeah. So a few thoughts on this. Back to the point about if you have a reduction in numbers and your requirements don't change, that means you're not going to be able to meet the requirements. And so the way you mitigate this is you have to do economies of scale, and you have to consolidate. And so I'm not sure of all of the analysis that was done by the Department of War, Department of Defense in the consolidation. But if you just look at all of the requirements that are out there and based upon the numbers that we have, consolidation is okay sometimes, right? So in the case of the combatant commands consolidating, I think another factor that has to inform whether that consolidation happens is what's happening on the ground in each of these AORs. And so, as you mentioned at the top of the hour when we started this, another carrier strike group heading to the Middle East, and the joke that I usually tell people is if you're at CENTCOM, it's almost like if you ever watch The Godfather, right, where he's trying to leave, but they pull him back in, right, and that is like CENTCOM.
They try to leave
Yeah.
for 20 years.
Exactly. So, there is a little bit of that reality and factor that I think has to be considered on whether there is a consolidation of all of the combatant commands. Because if you do that, that means there's probably going to be less focus on those individual areas and the implications of that, obviously.
Well, the National Defense Strategy just came out, right? Every 4 years, we just got the new one. I mean, drastically different read than Trump 1.0 and certainly different than the Biden NDA, and very clear. Focus on Western homeland security, Western Hemisphere, China containment, and I thought it was interesting. The read on CENTCOM was primarily just focused on Iran. There wasn't a lot else. I mean, any past NDA was about Iraq and energy and what's your read on that kind of singular focus on Iran and not so much talking about the rest? Is that us trying to get out of CENTCOM? Wishful thinking?
So a couple things on that point. Iran is the big elephant in the CENTCOM AOR by far. So I think there is a reason why there is a focus in Iran, and I think that's appropriate. There are many other bad actors within the CENTCOM AOR for sure, and I don't think like the NDS can't address every single actor or condition. So, I take the NDS as sort of a big document because many of the bad actors in the region, while they may not be Iranians, they're associated with the Iranians, and the Iranians are the ones that are supporting them. So, if you sort of pull the thread on where's the source of the issues, it leads back to Iran. And so I think there is a good reason why Iran is the focus. But to your point, there are other bad actors. I think over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of work done to reduce the effects of these bad actors within the theater, predominantly because of what Israel and the United States have been able to do with Iran, but also with the other entities that are operating, specifically the Iranian-aligned militias.
So it would seem if we could take care of that issue through one means or another, then maybe we could finally get out of CENTCOM, right?
Yeah, when we say we get out of CENTCOM, and it again depends on how the administration looks at the. I don't think we're gonna get out of CENTCOM. I think maybe we reduce numbers. The region is a critical region. If you just look at energy resources, it's got almost over 50% of the world's oil reserves and things of that nature. So, I think it would not be good for our national security if we completely left the CENTCOM AOR. There's going to be, I think, a need, in my mind, to at least have some presence to be able to influence the conditions that are there, because it is still a volatile environment. There's a lot, as we talked about, a lot of bad actors still in the region.
Yeah. Talk about CENTCOM contracted logistics support. I mean, you got LogCap, which has been a major player for years. APS programs, Army Prepositioned Stock, for those that don't know the acronyms, which seem to be getting folded into LogCap. You got DLA that's doing Class 1, the Class 3. As the CENTCOM J4, how did you view these different contracting vehicles in your toolkit, and how involved were you in shaping them? And do you see opportunity for consolidation of these programs going forward?
Yeah. So I think government contracting is absolutely critical. I think, as I've mentioned before, the requirements for the most part haven't changed as much as the capabilities that are present. The capabilities have been reduced, specifically organic U.S. capabilities, which means that the reliance on government contracting is actually increasing, or is greater than maybe what the military would want. But unfortunately, if you're going to meet the mission, you have to have the capabilities. And if it's not military, then you have to have government contracting. So, so that's the first piece. The second piece, to your point about different entities in the region relying on government contracting, Army prepositioned stocks for sure, DLA as they move. In fact, I'm not sure if they completed it, but they were moving from Bahrain to the Red Sea area for DLA distribution, and they're establishing other capabilities there. I think there's tremendous opportunities for government contracting in that area. As you know, for DLA, there's no significant military organizations in terms of personnel, military personnel underneath DLA. The capabilities very much supported by government contracting, right? So I think there's lots of opportunities there. I think the opportunities as CENTCOM rebalances the sustainment posture in the region is an opportunity for government contracting to facilitate that. And I think companies that integrate and collaborate with CENTCOM early will be the ones that will benefit the most from the rebalancing, because the rebalancing in CENTCOM AOR is not going to stop. It started before I was there, it continued while I was there, and it's still continuing. So companies, I think, should look at how is the CENTCOM AOR rebalancing their sustainment posture. And then if you just look down through the sustainment functions, you'll be able to determine maintenance. Where are the areas that a government contracting firm can facilitate what CENTCOM is trying to do? And just use it as a checklist. That's the way I would recommend for companies to take the 7 logistics functions that a joint staff J4 is required to be in charge of, and then start working through each of those categories. And it's not just CENTCOM; it's any COCOM, right? Looking at that particular COCOM, use the checklist to say, here's what I bring as a government contractor, and then start going down. What are the requirements for each of those areas for that particular COCOM? And that will, if you just do that mental exercise, I think that will open up ideas for where government contracting can provide value and benefit from providing the capability that's required.
And in CENTCOM, you're particularly focused on this kind of Western axis shift, right? Is that
Yes, absolutely. That and transportation, right? So there's a transportation contract in place. It gets reviewed every couple of years. But I think that requirement will remain and potentially increase as U.S. military forces downsize.
okay? Gold dust. This is great, good stuff for the audience, Mike. So we started slipping into it. You can't not do it. So let's talk about the future of CENTCOM. 3 years from now, early 2029. We've been through election. We don't know who won. Doesn't matter. There hasn't been an official handover, or we're just fresh into a new administration, whichever happened. What does CENTCOM look like? What's the posture look like? What's the role of government contractors in CENTCOM? Where are the opportunities in 2029?
So in 2029, I think the sustainment posture has shifted and will continue to shift to the west, but it will be more balanced. Where the pendulum before was swinging almost all to the west, I think we're going to be balanced, because the eastern seaboard of the Gulf region is still locations that are ripe for government contracting, whether it's Qatar, UAE, Bahrain. Those opportunities will remain. I think U.S. force presence will be somewhat reduced, but I don't think the presence will be gone. I think the region is too important from an energy perspective And really, if you look at the capabilities that the region has, not just from a resource perspective, but from capabilities, whether it's AI, whether it's regional sustainment capabilities, maintenance capabilities. So, one of the things that we had talked about when I was the J4 was how do we implement OSD, OSW's regional sustainment framework, RSF. And if you look at the region, which has the highest share of foreign military sales, which then means that they share a lot of the same common platforms as us, even though they have different versions, that also then leads to showing you that they have a lot of maintenance capabilities or logistics capabilities that support these platforms. Well, I think the US is going to leverage those capabilities a lot more as we go forward, especially as we reduce our own US organic capabilities. And if we keep a presence there, that would, I think, require us to have those partnerships. I think government contracting that realizes that and then starts working towards establishing relationships with local partners. You could almost do it a reverse, right? Where they partner with the local partner, then partner with the US, is an opportunity in 2028, 2029. I know there's a lot of hurdles with foreign military sales and with parts, but the companies that can sort of navigate that, I think will be able to benefit for what is going to be the CENTCOM posture in 2028, 2029.
Fascinating. I love it. And to our audience, I mean, Mike's he's a quartermaster guy, he's a CENTCOM guy, but he's also a data guy. He's an AI guy. We talked a lot about that in our past conversations. And if your company's looking for kind of what's the next gen of Army and DoD, Department of War Logistics looking like, Mike brings a lot of passion and energy around the technology side. I think it's very you're different than most of the quartermaster guys coming out. I think you're super passionate about that, and it's evident.
Yeah, no, if you really think about the future of logistics, I think foundationally, just like many other areas, merging technologies, especially AI, and and I know there's a lot of eye rolls when you start talking about AI, but what I will say is it's twofold. Number one, you whatever workflows a company has, you want to start with automating it first without, because you don't want to put AI on top of bad data. It's just doesn't do you any good. But the companies that then automate and then start adding layers of AI into it, those are the companies that are going to succeed. So it's an exciting world, and I think we just need to get on the bandwagon.
Hey, the industry side is lucky to get you stepping out of uniform, and I'm excited to see what you do. Before you leave, I want you to give us your one word. Talk about your gut feeling about the future of government contracting in. Let's talk CENTCOM, because that's where I see your expertise. What's your one word that you see?
Yeah, the one word I have is hopeful. And the reason I say that is because I think in the current environment that we're in, where there's a lot of effort to break down barriers that have been placed previously, whether it's procurement or acquisition, but more importantly, early collaboration with government contracting. That's where I'm very hopeful. I think that then opens up so many opportunities for government contracting to be able to work with the military. I'm already seeing it. And so that is my word for today. Hopeful.
I love it. I'm getting a lot of positivity on those words. I like it. We're going to hold you to it. Mike, thanks so much for coming. It's great to have gotten to know you here over the past couple of months. You have so much to give back to our war fighters, but also bringing all your fresh insights into the industry and into our community. Thrilled to have you as one of our precision experts. If anybody wants to have a chat with Mike, hit me up. Happy to help set that up. And I look forward to seeing you around the industry soon.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Mike. And hey, to our guests, hopefully you enjoyed this discussion. Mike's spot on so many topics. And if a lot of folks have done business in CENTCOM over the years, this is some fresh advice that's worth taking. But if you like this, make sure you pass this on to your network, and make sure you come back next week. We'll have another great episode on the Future of GovCon. We'll see you around. Thanks, everybody. All right, so thanks for joining me on another episode of the Future of GovCon. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and some of the bold predictions. If you did, take a second, share it on your social media, subscribe on YouTube. If you have any ideas for future guests or topics you'd like to have covered, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always there. You can always learn more about precision talent solutions at pts.careers. Look forward to seeing you next week on our next episode.